A young woman cannot afford a birthday cake. A kind stranger helps her, unaware that he carries a deep connection to her family. A small gesture of kindness would change their lives forever. Before listening to this incredible account, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories. The afternoon hung heavy over the capital city, bringing with it the typical July chill and a grey mist that seemed to mirror the anguish in Clara's chest. At 17, she walked through the bustling downtown streets with determined steps, but a heavy heart. Beside her, Luke bounced excitedly, his 7 years overflowing with anticipation as he prattled about the cake that would soon be his. "Are you sure the money is right, Clara?" the boy asked for the third time, squeezing his sister's hand tightly. His brown eyes shone with anxiety, mixed with hope. "Yes, I am, Luke. I counted it 3 times last night," Clara replied, forcing a smile to reassure her brother. But inside, a pang of nervousness bothered her. She had saved every cent for weeks, selling recyclables and doing odd jobs for neighbors. The cake would cost exactly $42.50, and she was sure she had collected that amount. The supermarket loomed ahead of them like a castle of glass and light, its automatic doors swallowing and spitting out people at a constant rhythm. Clara took a deep breath, adjusted her bag strap on her shoulder, and intertwined her fingers with her brother's. "Come on, little captain," she said, using the affectionate nickname that always brought a smile to Luke's face. Inside the establishment, the air conditioning greeted them with welcome relief. Clara headed directly to the bakery section, where colorful cakes vied for space behind the refrigerated glass. Luke pressed his face against the cold surface, leaving a small vapor mark. "It's that one," he exclaimed, pointing to a round cake covered in sky-blue frosting. In the center, a small sugar rocket pointed to infinity, surrounded by edible golden stars. "Exactly as I dreamed." The bakery employee, a middle-aged woman in a floral apron, smiled at the boy's enthusiasm. "Excellent choice, dear. It's the Space Explorer cake, very popular with children." Clara felt her heart race as the woman took the cake from the display case and carefully placed it in a white cardboard box. Each movement seemed to happen in slow motion, as if the universe were giving her time to prepare for the moment of truth. At the checkout, a considerable queue stretched out ahead of them. Clara used the wait to check the money in her wallet once more, counting the crumpled bills and the coins jingling at the bottom of her purse. $42.50. Everything was fine. But when it was finally her turn and the cashier scanned the cake's barcode, the digital display showed a number that made Clara's world collapse. 48 East Gauntz. "There must be some mistake," she murmured, feeling her face flush. The price on the display said $42.50. The employee, a young woman with her hair in a ponytail, checked the system with an apologetic expression. "Unfortunately, there was a price adjustment this morning, dear. The system has been updated, but the labels haven't yet. It really is $48. Luke looked at his sister with wide eyes, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing from the tension in the air that something wasn't right. The queue behind them began to stir with impatient sighs and disapproving glances. Clara opened and closed her wallet 2-3 times as if the missing $5.50 would magically appear. Her hands trembled slightly as she counted the money once more, hoping against all logic that she had made some error in her previous calculations. I have $42.50, she said, her voice softer than she intended. Could I take off some decorations? The candles, maybe?" The cashier exchanged a sympathetic look with her bakery colleague, who came closer to help. "Dear, unfortunately, the price is fixed. It's a ready-made cake. We can't remove parts of it." Luke tugged on Clara's sleeve, his small, confused voice cutting through the supermarket noise. "Clara, aren't we taking the cake home?" Her brother's question was like a stab to her chest. Clara looked into those brown eyes full of expectation and felt her world collapse. How could she explain to a 7-year-old that his dream wouldn't come true because of a measly $5.50? "I'm so sorry," she said to the employees, her voice choked. "We thought we had enough. I have to leave the cake here." The awkward silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. People in the queue began to murmur among themselves, some impatiently, others with pity. Luke said nothing, but Clara could see tears forming in the corners of his eyes. It was then that a firm, gentle voice cut through the tension in the atmosphere. "I'll pay the difference." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. A man of approximately 60 years approached the checkout, taking his wallet from the inner pocket of his coat. He had neatly cut grey hair, an upright posture, and blue eyes that conveyed a natural authority mixed with kindness. He wore a dark overcoat and carried a brown leather briefcase. "You don't have to." "Sir?" Clara protested immediately, her face red with embarrassment. "We can manage." But the man was already extending the money to the cashier, ignoring the young woman's protests. "It's only $5.50. It's nothing at all," he said, with a warm smile directed at Luke, who looked at him as if he were an apparition. "Thank you, sir," Clara murmured, unsure how to react to the unexpected generosity. "I promise I'll pay you back. If you give me your name or address." "Don't worry about it," the man replied, waving his hand to dismiss the idea. "Enjoy the cake. Happy birthday, young man." Luke finally found his voice. "Thank you very much, sir. You're a true hero." The man smiled more broadly and gave the boy a playful salute. "You're welcome, soldier. Take good care of your sister." Clara took the bag with the cake, still stunned by the unexpected kindness. When they left the supermarket, she turned to thank him once more, but the man had already disappeared among the aisles. "Clara, did you see? A real angel!" exclaimed Luke, clutching the cake box to his chest as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. "Yes, Luke. A real angel," she agreed, unaware that this seemingly casual encounter was about to change their lives forever. What she couldn't know was that the kind man hadn't left. He watched them from afar, waiting for them to leave the supermarket, and something in his expression suggested that this encounter was just the beginning of a much larger story. When the two figures disappeared into the crowd of the cold afternoon, the man finally moved, following them at a respectful distance, as if an invisible force compelled him to protect those two children he had just met. Victor Alliance kept a safe distance as he watched the two siblings walk through the streets of the capital city. His military instincts, sharpened by decades of training, alerted him that something in this situation deserved special attention. It wasn't just the spontaneous generosity that had motivated him to pay for the cake. There was something deeper, a connection he couldn't yet fully explain. Clara and Luke walked slowly, the weight of the cake box alternating between them every block. Victor noticed that even with the bus stop right ahead, the siblings walked past it, continuing on foot. When a light drizzle began to fall, they sheltered under the awning of a closed shop for a few minutes, but soon resumed their walk. "They don't have money for the bus fare," Victor murmured to himself, feeling a tightness in his chest. The observation reminded him of his own difficult childhood, when every saved penny made the difference between having food on the table or not. The district gradually changed as they moved away from downtown. The streets became narrower, the buildings lower and more worn. Victor recognized the area. It was where one of the Hope Institute's extensions operated, the community organization he had directed for 5 years, ever since retiring from the army. 40 minutes later, Clara and Luke finally stopped in front of a 3-story building with a peeling facade. But instead of entering through the main door, they went around the building and descended a side staircase that led to the basement. Victor frowned. That couldn't be their address. He waited a few more minutes before discreetly approaching the staircase. A small, almost illegible sign indicated, "Storage, do not enter." But muffled voices came from below, confirming that was exactly where the siblings had entered. From outside, Victor could hear fragments of the conversation. Luke's excited voice telling about the angel who had appeared at the supermarket, and Clara's trying to calm him, reminding him that their mother hadn't arrived home from work yet. "Rose only gets home after 10, Clara said. "She's working overtime again at the cleaning company. We'll save a big piece of cake for her, okay?" "What if she's too tired to celebrate?" Luke asked, his childish voice carrying a premature maturity that made Victor clench his fists. "Even when she's tired, she always has energy for you, little captain. You know, that." The term "little captain" echoed in Victor's mind like an echo from the past. It had been years since he had heard that specific expression. It was something an old comrade in arms used to say to his own grandson, a courageous man who had saved his life more than once during the war. Intrigued, Victor decided to remain hidden for a while longer in the shadows of the poorly lit street. That's when he briefly saw Clara appear at the small basement window to close an improvised curtain. It was just a glimpse, but it was enough for Victor to notice something that made his blood run cold. Hanging around her neck, almost hidden by her blouse, was a small metallic pendant. Even at a distance and with little light, Victor immediately recognized its distinctive shape. It was a military medal, specifically the Military Medal of Honor for Merit, awarded only to soldiers who distinguished themselves in acts of extreme bravery. Victor instinctively brought his hand to his own chest, where an identical medal rested beneath his shirt, hidden from the world for so many years. But it wasn't just the medal that disturbed him. It was the vivid memory of when he had last seen that specific piece. Mark, he whispered the name like a prayer. Mark Carson, his comrade in arms, had worn that medal with pride until the day of his military retirement. A man who had risked his own life to save Victor during a dangerous border operation years ago. A man who had become more than a colleague. He had become a brother. Memories began to flow like a flood. Mark talking about his granddaughter, who had been orphaned by her father very early. Mark showing pictures of his daughter Rose, who worked hard to support the children alone. Mark always worried about his family, always sending part of his pay to help with expenses. And then came the most painful memory. Mark's funeral 2 years ago. Victor had tried to find the family to offer support, but Rose had moved without a trace, apparently fleeing debts accumulated after her father's medical treatment. Clara, Victor murmured, testing the name he had heard the boys say. Now it made sense. The courageous young woman who had faced the embarrassing situation at the supermarket with such dignity was Mark's great-granddaughter. The cheerful, dreamy boy was his great-grandson. Victor felt a mixture of conflicting emotions. Joy at finally having found the family he had been searching for so long, and anguish at realizing the deplorable conditions in which they were living. Mark had died believing he was leaving an emergency fund for his family, but Victor suspected that medical debts had consumed everything. A faint light flickered on in the basement window, briefly revealing the interior. Victor could glimpse a small, damp space with exposed concrete walls and sparse furniture. A single bed against the wall, a portable electric stove on a plastic table, and piles of clothes organized in improvised crates. How Mark would feel about this, Victor thought, feeling a heavy responsibility settle on his shoulders. His old comrade had saved his life, and now fate had placed Mark's family right in front of him, clearly in need of help. But Victor knew he couldn't just knock on the door and introduce himself. Rose worked for a cleaning company, most likely the same company that provided services to the Hope Institute building. If that were the case, she would know him as the director, a figure of authority who could pose a threat to someone in a vulnerable situation. He needed a careful strategy. Any false move could frighten the family or be interpreted as an invasion of privacy, but he couldn't just leave and pretend he knew nothing. The medal around Clara's neck was a sign he couldn't ignore. He was so lost in thought that he barely noticed when the basement door opened again. Clara appeared, now wearing a thicker coat, and climbed the stairs carrying a trash bag. Victor hid better among the shadows, watching as she took the trash to the street bin. It was when she passed under a streetlight that Victor had a clear view of the medal. There was no doubt it was the same one Mark had received for his heroic acts during military service, the same medal he had sworn to pass down to future generations as a symbol of the family's honor and courage. Clara paused for a moment on the sidewalk, looking up at the night sky where some stars were beginning to appear between the clouds. Victor saw her lightly touch the medal, an automatic gesture that suggested the piece held deep sentimental value for her. "Grandpa Mark," he heard her whisper into the silent night. "Thank you for sending that angel today. Luke was so happy." The words were like a punch to Victor's stomach. She was thanking her grandfather for the help she had received at the supermarket. The irony of the situation was almost poetic. Mark's spiritual grandson had appeared to help Mark's true great-grandchildren without either side knowing of the connection. Clara returned to the basement, but Victor remained on the street for another hour, wrestling with his own emotions and trying to devise a plan. He knew his intervention was inevitable. It was a matter of honor and loyalty to Mark's memory. But he also knew he needed to act wisely. When he finally decided to leave, Victor already had the outline of a plan in mind. First, he needed to confirm his suspicions about Rose and her workplace. Then, he needed to find a way to approach the family without seeming invasive or threatening. As he walked back to his apartment downtown, Victor couldn't stop thinking about the expression of gratitude in Luke's eyes when he had paid for the cake. He didn't know it yet, but that would be just the first of many surprises fate had reserved for him and Mark's family. The next morning, Victor arrived at the Hope Institute with a specific mission in mind. The 8-story building housing the community organization buzzed with activity: classrooms for after-school tutoring, vocational workshops, free medical clinics, and a community kitchen that served hundreds of meals daily. But Victor wasn't interested in the educational activities at that moment. He went directly to the administrative department, where Fiona Salling, his secretary for 3 years, organized contracts with suppliers. "Fiona, I need to see the contract with the cleaning company," he said, trying to maintain a casual tone. "Any problem, Dr. Victor?" she asked, looking up from her papers. Fiona was an efficient woman in her 40s, who knew Victor well enough to sense when something was bothering him. "No specific problem. I just want to review some contract clauses." Fiona handed him the corresponding folder, and Victor took it to his office. He quickly flipped through the pages until he found the list of employees assigned to the building. And there she was. Rose Carson, an employee registered for 2 years, responsible for cleaning the upper floors during the night shift. "Carson," Victor murmured, confirming his suspicions. Rose had kept her father Mark's surname. Now he was absolutely certain it was the family he was looking for. He checked his watch. It was 10 in the morning, which meant Rose was probably finishing her shift. Night cleaning staff usually worked from 10 at night to 6 in the morning, but many worked overtime to supplement their income. Victor went down to the 5th floor, where he knew the cleaning was being finalized. He found Rose at the end of the corridor, wiping windows with mechanical, tired movements. She was a woman in her 40s, too thin, with brown hair tied in a simple bun and clothes that had clearly seen better days. When Rose turned and saw him there, her face instantly paled. She dropped the cloth to the floor and straightened up, trying to assume a more formal posture. "Dr. Victor, I didn't expect to see you here. Is there a problem with my work?" Her voice trembled slightly, laden with an anxiety Victor immediately recognized. It was the fear of someone who couldn't afford to lose their job. "No problem at all, Rose. Your work is impeccable," Victor replied, noticing how fragile she looked under the fluorescent light of the corridor. There were deep, dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly, evident signs of extreme exhaustion. "Thank you, sir. I always strive to do the best possible job," she said, quickly bending down to pick up the fallen cloth. Victor observed her movement and noticed how Rose slowly stood up, leaning against the wall for a moment. It was subtle, but he had been trained to notice signs of physical weakness, and that was definitely not normal. "Rose, are you all right? You look a little pale," he commented with genuine concern. "I'm perfectly fine, Dr. Victor. Just a bit tired, but nothing serious. The work here is very good. I have no complaints at all." The answer came too quickly, too defensively. Victor knew Rose was lying, but he also understood why. For someone in economic vulnerability, admitting any weakness to their employer could mean the difference between keeping or losing their family's livelihood. "How long have you worked here?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. 2 years and 3 months, sir, since the company hired me for this building." Rose nervously wiped, her hands on her apron. "If there's any complaint about my performance—" "There are no complaints, Rose, on the contrary." Victor paused, choosing his words carefully. "Do you have family?" The question seemed to catch Rose by surprise. For a moment, a softer expression crossed her face, a mother's love speaking louder than the employee's fear. "I have 2 children, Clara, 17, and Luke, 7. They are good children, very responsible." The pride in her voice was undeniable, even mixed with tiredness. "It must be difficult to juggle night work with caring for them," Victor observed. "Clara helps me. A lot. She's very mature for her age. She takes care of her brother as if she were his mother." Rose hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I lost my father 2 years ago. He helped a lot with the children. Since then, it's just been the 3 of us." Victor felt a pang in his chest upon hearing the indirect confirmation. Rose was talking about Mark without knowing he had been Victor's close friend. "I'm sorry for your loss. Was your father a special person?" Rose's eyes filled with suppressed tears. "He was the most honorable man I ever knew. A retired military man, very strict with discipline, but with a heart as big as the world. He always said family comes first, always. He would have given his life for his great-grandchildren." "I'm sure he was an admirable man," Victor said, struggling to control his own emotions. Every word from Rose confirmed his memories of Mark, a man of integrity who put family above all else. Rose discreetly wiped her eyes and returned to professional mode. "I'm sorry, Dr. Victor. I shouldn't be talking about my personal life during work." "It's all right, Rose. Sometimes it's important to remember the people we love." Victor noticed she was holding the cleaning bucket too tightly, as if it were an anchor in a stormy sea. "Are you sure you're feeling well? I can ask someone to finish your shift today." "No, sir, please, there's no need for that. I'm fine, I can finish the work." The panic in Rose's voice was palpable. "I need the overtime. I can't afford to leave early." The brutal honesty of her confession hit Victor like a punch. Rose was clearly at the limit of physical exhaustion, but she couldn't give up. Even an hour of work, because every cent made a difference for her family's survival. "Rose, the Institute has some assistance programs for employees. If you'd like, we can discuss." "No, sir. Thank you very much, but we don't need charity. We just need to work." The dignity in Rose's voice was the same Victor had seen in Mark so many times. Wounded pride, but never bowed. Victor was about to reply when he saw Rose falter slightly. She leaned against the wall again, this time more obviously, and put a hand to her forehead. "Rose? It's all right, just a little dizziness. It'll pass." But even as she spoke, she was clearly struggling to stay on her feet. Victor took a step towards her, protective instincts activated. "Sit down for a moment. I'll get you a glass of water." "No need, Dr. Victor. Rose tried to take a step, but her legs gave way. Victor managed to catch her before she fell, supporting her weight against his chest. "Fiona!" Victor shouted down the corridor. "Call the infirmary, quick!" Rose tried to protest, mumbling something about being fine and not needing a doctor, but her voice was weak, and her eyelids heavy. Victor helped her sit on the corridor floor, leaning against the wall. "When was the last time you ate something?" he asked, already suspecting the answer. "Yesterday. Last night. I saved my portion of dinner for Luke. He's growing. He needs to eat more." The answer came in a whisper, but it was loud enough for Victor to hear. The revelation hit Victor like a lightning bolt. Rose was starving herself so her children could eat. She was working double shifts in a state of malnutrition, sacrificing her own health to support her family. Fiona came, running with Alan Collins, the Institute's nurse. As they checked Rose's vital signs, Victor made a decision that would change everything. He could no longer remain a distant observer. Mark had saved his life, and now Mark's family needed saving. But he also knew that revealing his identity at that moment would be a mistake. Rose was vulnerable, scared, and any dramatic revelation about his connection to Mark could be interpreted as manipulation or emotional blackmail. For now, he would just be the boss concerned about a valuable employee. But secretly, he would begin to devise a plan to get Rose and the children out of that desperate situation, thus honoring the memory of the man who had been more than a comrade in arms. He had been a brother. In the Hope Institute's infirmary, Rose rested on a narrow cot while Alan Collins checked her blood pressure for the second time in 10 minutes. The nurse, a middle-aged man with experience in community medical care, frowned with concern. "Very low blood pressure, clear signs of dehydration and hypoglycemia," he murmured to Victor, who waited anxiously by the door. When was the last time she had a full meal? Victor didn't know how to answer, but the question echoed in his mind like an accusation. As director of an organization dedicated to fighting hunger and misery, he had failed to notice that one of his own employees was in need right under his nose. "Does she need to be hospitalized?" Victor asked, keeping his voice low so as not to alarm Rose, who seemed to be dozing. "It would be ideal, but I doubt she'll accept. People in economically vulnerable situations avoid hospitals for fear of costs, even knowing that public health care is free." Alan adjusted the IV drip he had, improvised with solutions available in the infirmary. "What she urgently needs is rest, adequate nutrition, and a safe environment." Victor nodded gravely. "Do whatever is necessary to stabilize her. I'll take care of the rest." While Alan took care of Rose, Victor left the infirmary and went directly to his office. He had several calls to make and little time to execute his plan. The first call was to Theo Miller, the building manager responsible for the maintenance of the Institute's facilities. "Theo, I need you to prepare one of the emergency accommodations on the 6th floor for 3 people, a mother and 2 children." "Any specific situation, Dr. Victor?" Theo asked, accustomed to urgent requests from the director. "One of our employees fell ill. She and her family need temporary accommodation while we sort some things out." Victor chose his words carefully. "Please provide bedding, hygiene products, and ensure the kitchenette is functional." The second call was more delicate. Victor dialed the Human Resources Department of the outsourced cleaning company, asking to speak directly with the supervisor responsible for Rose. "Peter Lyman here," a gruff voice replied on the other end of the line. "Mr. Lyman, this is Dr. Victor Alliance, director of the Hope Institute. I'm calling about employee Rose Carson." "Ah, Rose, I hope there are no complaints. She's a bit weak, but she does the job right." The casual description of Rose's fragility as a bit weak deeply irritated Victor. "On the contrary, I'm calling to inform you that Rose will have paid leave for the next few days due to medical reasons." "Paid leave? That's not in her contract. She's an hourly worker. If she doesn't work, she doesn't get paid." "Then we'll change the contract," Victor said in a tone that left no room for discussion. "As of today, Rose will be promoted to a salaried employee with all corresponding benefits. If this is a problem for your company, I can reconsider the entire service provision contract." There was an awkward pause on the other end of the line. Victor knew that the contract with the Institute represented a significant slice of the company's revenue. No problem at all, Dr. Victor. We will arrange her promotion documentation immediately." "Excellent. And Mr. Lyman, if I discover that any employee is being treated improperly or suffering any kind of psychological pressure, our partnership will end. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, sir." Victor hung up and returned to the infirmary. Rose was awake, trying to sit up on the cot despite Alan's protests. "Dr. Victor, I need to go home. My children will be home from school, and there's no one to look after them," she said, her voice still weak but determined. "Rose, you fainted less than an hour ago. You're not in a condition to look after anyone right now." "But they need me. Clara takes on too much responsibility for her age, and Luke." Rose tried to pull out the IV needle, but Alan gently held her hand. "Mrs. Rose, you need to understand that you are in a state of severe exhaustion. If you continue like this, you could have serious complications." Victor approached the cot. "Rose, I have a proposal. The Institute has emergency accommodations for situations like this. You and your children can stay here for a few days until you fully recover." Rose's face immediately hardened. "I don't need charity, Dr. Victor. I can take care of my family." "It's not charity. It's an extension of employee benefits. You work here, you're entitled to it." "I don't want to cause trouble for anyone." Victor pulled up a chair and sat beside the cot, looking directly into Rose's eyes. "May I ask you a personal question?" She nodded hesitantly. "If your father were alive and saw you in this state, what would he do?" Rose's eyes instantly filled with tears. He would do everything to protect us. He always said family comes first. Then accept the help for them." Victor paused meaningfully. Sometimes accepting help is the bravest act we can do. Rose remained silent for long moments, tears rolling down her face. Finally, she nodded almost imperceptibly. "Just for a few days," she murmured. Victor left the infirmary and personally went to pick up Clara and Luke from school. He explained to Clara, carefully and diplomatically, that their mother had fallen ill at work and that they would temporarily stay at the institute while she recovered. "Is she okay?" Clara asked, her voice laden with an anxiety too mature for her 17 years. "She'll be fine. She just needs rest and proper medical care," Victor assured her. When they arrived at the institute, Luke was fascinated by the large, bustling building. "It's like a castle," he exclaimed, running through the corridors while Clara tried to keep him quiet. The accommodation Theo had prepared was simple but comfortable. 2 small bedrooms, a living room with a sofa, a basic kitchenette, and a bathroom. For a family accustomed to a damp basement, it seemed like a palace. "Temporary," Rose repeated to herself when she finally went up to see the accommodation. "Just temporary." But Victor was already planning to make it permanent. During dinner in the Institute's community kitchen, he observed how Rose ate slowly, savoring each mouthful as if she didn't want to waste anything. Luke chattered animatedly about his first day in a real castle, while Clara remained cautious, clearly suspicious of the unexpected generosity. "Dr. Victor," Clara said when they finished eating, "why are you doing this for us? You don't know us." The direct question caught Victor off guard. For a moment, he considered revealing everything: his friendship with Mark, the recognition of the medal, the debt of gratitude he carried. But something stopped him. "Sometimes we find people who need help," he said carefully. "And sometimes we are able to offer it. There doesn't need to be a more complex reason than that." Clara studied him with shrewd eyes. "You seem like a good person. But good people don't just appear out of nowhere, especially not for people like us." The young woman's astute observation made Victor smile. "You are very intelligent, Clara. Your grandfather would be proud." The mention of her grandfather made Clara instinctively touch the medal around her neck. "Did you know my grandfather?" Victor hesitated. It was the perfect opening to reveal everything. But something in the atmosphere, the family's vulnerability, Rose's precarious situation, made him hold back. "I knew many military personnel during my career. Honorable men, dedicated to their families." It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. That night, as the family settled into the accommodation, Victor stayed in his office planning the next steps. He had managed to stabilize the immediate situation, but he knew he needed a long-term solution. That's when Fiona knocked on the door, holding some papers with a worried expression. "Dr. Victor, a notification from Child Protection Services has arrived. Someone made an anonymous report about children at risk in the building. They're going to conduct an inspection tomorrow." Victor's blood ran cold. If Child Protection Services determined that Rose was unable to adequately care for her children, Clara and Luke could be placed in shelters or foster families. Looking out the office window, Victor could see the light on in the accommodation where the family was resting for the first time in months. He would not allow that family to be separated, not after everything Mark had done for him. It was time to stop acting merely as a benevolent boss and start acting as what he truly was. Someone who owed everything to Mark Carson and who finally had the chance to repay him. Morning arrived, laden with tension at the Hope Institute. Victor had spent the entire night awake, reviewing legal documents and making calls to known lawyers. He knew that when Child Protection Services arrived, every detail would be meticulously evaluated, and any failure could result in the family's separation. Rose was in the community kitchen, helping prepare breakfast with nervous movements. Even after a night's rest and a few adequate meals, she still seemed fragile, but there was an iron determination in her eyes. Luke played in the Institute's inner courtyard with other children attending the educational programs, oblivious to the tension hanging in the air. Clara, however, remained on high alert. She was sitting in the reception area, observing everyone who entered the building like a soldier on guard duty. Victor recognized the posture. He had seen the same protective vigilance in Mark so many times. "Dr. Victor," said Fiona, approaching with a grave expression, "the social workers have just arrived. They're heading up to your office." Victor took a deep breath. "Ask Rose and Clara to come as well. It's important for everyone to be present." 15 minutes later, his office was full. 2 social workers, a middle-aged woman named Agnes Lyman and a young man named Aaron, sat before Victor's desk. Rose was in the chair beside him, with Clara standing just behind her, a protective hand on her mother's shoulder. "Dr. Alliance," Agnes began, consulting her papers, "we received an anonymous report alleging that there are children at risk living in your facilities. Could you explain the situation?" Victor chose his words carefully. "Rose Carson has been an employee of the Institute for 2 years. She fell ill yesterday due to exhaustion, and we offered temporary accommodation for her and her children while she recovers." Aaron looked at Rose. "Mrs. Carson, could you tell us about your living conditions before coming here?" Rose hesitated, looking at Victor as if asking for permission. "We lived in a rented basement. It was what we could afford." "A basement?" Agnes frowned. "Can you describe the conditions?" Rose's voice faded as she described the dampness, the lack of adequate heating, the precarious electrical wiring. Clara squeezed her mother's shoulder when she saw tears begin to form. "And what about food?" Aaron asked. "Do the children have regular meals?" That's when Rose broke down. I tried, but sometimes there wasn't enough. Clara and Luke always ate first. Always." Agnes and Aaron exchanged significant glances, and Victor felt his heart race. He knew that those admissions, however honest and understandable, painted a picture of involuntary neglect that could be used to remove the children. "Dr. Alliance," Agnes said, "while your intention is commendable, we need to assess whether this family has the structural conditions to remain together. The children may need temporary placement in foster families while the mother stabilizes." "No!" The word exploded from Clara with surprising force. "Please, don't separate us. I take care of Luke. I help my mother with everything. We're not a burden to anyone." Rose began to cry silently, and Victor saw the absolute terror in her eyes. It was every mother's nightmare, losing her children not for lack of love, but for lack of resources. It was at that moment that Victor made the decision that would change everything. "Excuse me," he said, standing up and walking to a safe in the corner of the office. He took out a small wooden box he had kept for years and returned to his chair. "Before you make any decisions, there's something I need to tell this family." Victor opened the box, revealing a military medal identical to the one Clara wore around her neck. "Rose, do you recognize this medal?" Rose blinked in confusion. It's just like my father's. The Military Medal of Honor for Merit. Exactly the same because it's from the same group, the same operation." Victor took a deep breath. "My full name is Victor Alliance, but during my years of military service, I was known as Lieutenant Victor. I served alongside an extraordinary man named Mark Carson, your father." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara brought her hand to the medal around her neck. Rose's eyes widened, and even the social workers seemed surprised by the revelation. You knew my father," Rose whispered. "Mark wasn't just a comrade in arms. He saved my life 3 times during our border mission. The last time, when we returned home, I was completely broke, with no prospects, no hope. Mark lent me $50, everything he had, so I could buy a suit and interview for a civilian job." Victor held the medal, a vivid memory of those times. "That interview changed my life. I got the job, built a career, eventually founded this institute, all because Mark believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. But why?" Rose tried to form words through her tears. "Why did you never look for us? After Dad, I tried. When I learned Mark had passed away, I searched for you for months, but you had moved and I couldn't find you." Victor looked directly at Clara. "Until yesterday, when I saw a courageous young woman trying to buy a cake for her brother and recognized the medal around her neck." Clara touched the medal with trembling fingers. I was at the supermarket. Your grandfather always said that a soldier never abandons his comrade. I unintentionally abandoned you, but I won't abandon you now." Victor turned to the social workers. "I would like to formally request temporary guardianship of this family. I have financial resources, adequate structure, and a debt of honor to the man who saved my life." Agnes seemed stunned. "Dr. Alliance, this is very unusual. We would need to verify your qualifications, conduct assessments, perform all necessary checks, consult my military background, my financial situation, the Institute's references. But while you do that, this family remains united and under my responsibility." Aaron consulted some papers. "Dr. Alliance, your reputation as a military man and as director of this organization is impeccable. If the family agrees, we can establish temporary guardianship while we conduct the full assessment." Rose looked at Clara and then at Victor, tears rolling freely down her face. "Mark always said you were the most honorable man he knew. He said you saved more lives after the war than during it, through your social work. He talked about me? Always he said that one day our paths would cross again, that it was destiny." Rose held Clara's hand. "If you trust Dr. Victor, I trust him too." Victor felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Finally, after 2 years of carrying the guilt of not having been present when Mark passed away, he had the chance to honor his friend's memory. "There's one more thing," he said, returning to the safe and taking out a yellowed letter. "Mark wrote me this letter before he passed. I only managed to read it all last night." With trembling hands, Victor opened the letter and read aloud. "My friend Victor, if you are reading this, it means our mission here has come to an end. I am not afraid to depart, but I have one concern, Rose and the children. I know you will look after them if you ever meet again, not out of obligation, but out of friendship. They are good people, strong as I tried to be. Clara has your courage, Luke has your joy, and Rose has our sense of justice. Take care of them, as I would take care of you. A soldier never abandons his comrade. Your eternal friend, Mark." When Victor finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the office. Even Agnes discreetly wiped away tears. "Well," said the social worker, organizing her papers, "I believe we have sufficient grounds to approve temporary guardianship. Dr. Alliance, we will formalize the paperwork today." When the social workers left, the room remained silent for long moments. Finally, Clara approached Victor. May I see your medal?" Victor handed it to her, and she held it next to her own medal. They were identical, representing not only military valor but a bond that transcended time. "Grandpa Mark always said the medal was to remind us that we are never alone," Clara whispered. "I think I understand what he meant now." Rose approached and hugged Victor, an embrace that carried 2 years of grief, gratitude, and a new beginning. "Welcome home," Victor said, finally allowing himself to believe that Mark would be proud. 6 months later, the Hope Institute had transformed into something much larger than Victor had ever imagined. What began as a community organization focused on education had expanded to include an innovative housing program, a community kitchen that served 300 meals daily, and a family assistance project that served more than 50 vulnerable families. Rose Carson was no longer just a cleaning employee. She now held the position of Family Assistance Coordinator, a role specifically created for her after Victor recognized her unique ability to understand the needs of struggling families. Wearing a navy blue uniform with the Institute's logo embroidered on the chest, she walked through the corridors with the confidence of someone who had finally found her place in the world. "Dr. Victor," she said, entering his office on a sunny January morning, "we have a new family that arrived today. A single mother with 3 children. They've been sleeping in a car for 2 weeks. Victor looked up from the reports he was reviewing. "Do we have vacancies in the accommodation?" "We do, but there's another problem. The mother is afraid to accept help. She says she doesn't want charity." Rose smiled with an understanding that only someone who had lived that experience could have. "I recognize that pride. It was exactly how I felt a few months ago." "What do you suggest?" "That I talk to her first. Mother to mother. Sometimes we need to hear from someone who has been through the same situation, that it's possible to accept help without losing dignity." Victor nodded, admiring how Rose had grown in that position. It was natural for her, as if she had been born for it. "Do as you see fit. You have carte blanche." As Rose left to care for the new family, Victor received a visit from Clara, who was now studying administration at a private college with a scholarship he had secured through his contacts. At 18, she had maintained the determination and maturity that characterized her, but now radiated a confidence that came from having security and future prospects. Victor, she said, using the name by which she had begun to call him after he officially became her guardian, I want to talk about an idea I had. I'm listening. The building where we used to live, the one with the basement, I heard it's scheduled for demolition. Clara sat in the chair opposite his desk. What if, instead of letting them demolish it, we transformed that place into something useful? Victor leaned forward, interested. What kind of transformation? A community center for at-risk children. The basement could become a children's library, the ground floor a community kitchen, and the upper floors could be renovated to temporarily house families. Clara's eyes shone with enthusiasm. It would be like giving new life to a place that once represented our pain. The idea was brilliant. Victor had learned to trust Clara's instinct. She had a natural talent for identifying needs and creative solutions. Have you already checked the legal status of the building? Yes, the owner owes 3 years of property tax and is desperate to get rid of the property. We can buy it for a value well below market and use the Institute's connections to secure funding for the renovation. And Luke, what does he think of the idea? Clara smiled. He wants the library to have a special section on astronomy. He says that way other children can dream of being astronauts like him. Luke had changed drastically in recent months. The shy and cautious boy had transformed into a confident and dreamy child who attended regular school during the day and participated in the Institute's activities in the afternoon. His interest in astronomy had blossomed after Victor took him to visit a planetarium, and now he constantly talked about planets, stars, and space exploration. All right, Victor said. Let's move forward with the project. But there's one condition. You will coordinate the renovation. It's time for you to start taking on real responsibilities here at the Institute. Clara's face lit up. Seriously, you trust me with that? Clara, you organized your entire family's move when you were 16. I believe you can organize a building renovation. 3 months later, what was once an abandoned and dilapidated building had transformed into the Mark Carson Community Center, a name chosen unanimously by the family. The inauguration was an emotional celebration, with hundreds of people from the community, local authorities, and representatives from other social organizations. Rose, wearing a navy blue suit that Victor had insisted on buying for her, cut the inaugural ribbon alongside Clara and Luke. The damp basement where they had once slept in precarious conditions was now a colorful and welcoming library, with hundreds of children's books and a special corner dedicated to astronomy. Who would have thought, Rose murmured, watching children happily run through the corridors that once represented her hopelessness. Dad would be proud to see this. Victor, wearing his old military uniform in honor of Mark, held a faded photograph from his service days. In the image, he and Mark appeared, young and smiling, arms linked in camaraderie. He is proud, he said with conviction. I'm sure of it. The community kitchen on the ground floor was already in full swing, serving free meals to anyone who needed them. Rose had implemented a system where the beneficiary families themselves helped prepare and distribute the food, creating a sense of community and dignity that went far beyond simple charity. Luke, now 8 years old, wore a T-shirt with the phrase "Junior Captain," a gift from Victor, and ran through the hall helping to serve meals with the seriousness of someone carrying out an important mission. He had become a kind of mascot for the project, always eager to help and incredibly affectionate with other children who arrived scared and distrustful. "Dr. Victor," said a young mother who had just arrived with a baby in her arms, "I heard about this place through a friend, but I still don't understand. Why do you do this? What do you gain by helping people like me?" Victor smiled, remembering a very similar question Clara had asked months ago. He pointed to the wall where a framed display now held the 2 military medals, his own and Mark's, side by side. "See those medals? They represent a friendship that saved lives, created hope, and generated a legacy that continues to grow. We do this because no one should fight alone. Not anymore." The answer seemed to satisfy the young woman, who settled at one of the tables with her baby, accepting a plate of food served by Clara with the kindness of someone who knew exactly how she felt. As night fell over the city, Victor remained alone in the community center, watching the last volunteers tidy up the space for the next day. Rose had taken Luke home, and Clara was in a meeting with other university students to plan new social projects. Victor went up to what was once the basement and was now the library. He sat on one of the small, colorful chairs, surrounded by children's books and drawings made by the children who frequented the space. On the wall, a large mural painted by volunteers showed rockets flying towards the stars with the phrase, "Every dream can take off." "Mark, my friend," Victor murmured to the silent room, "we did it. Your family is safe, thriving, and helping others to thrive too. The legacy you started lives on." At that moment, Clara appeared at the library door. "Victor, I thought you had gone home." "Just reflecting a bit." He stood up from the child's chair, smiling. "How was the meeting?" "Very good. We decided to expand the project to other cities. Rose will lead a group of consultants who will help other organizations implement similar models." Clara approached the rocket mural. "You know, sometimes it still feels like a dream. A year ago we were sleeping in this very place without hope, without prospects. And now, I understand what Grandpa Mark always meant when he talked about soldiers who never abandon their comrades. He was talking about family, in the broadest sense of the word. We can all be soldiers for someone in need." Victor nodded, feeling a paternal pride that had grown gradually over the months. "And you? What are your plans now?" "I want to continue studying, get a degree in administration, but I also want to stay here working with you all. This place, this mission, it's where I belong." Clara touched the medal she still wore around her neck. "It's where Grandpa, Mark, would want me to be." As they left the community center that night, Victor looked once more at the building that stood illuminated against the night sky. Where once there had been only pain and abandonment, now shone hope and renewal. The cycle was complete. Mark had saved his life, he had saved Mark's family, and now, all together, they were saving other families. In the taxi back home, Clara fell asleep leaning on Victor's shoulder, exhausted but happy after the long day of work. Victor looked out the window at the city lights and smiled, knowing that tomorrow would be just another day of a mission he intended to continue for the rest of his life. The medal on his chest felt lighter now, no longer a weight of unresolved guilt, but a luminous reminder that sometimes destiny gives us second chances to do the right thing, and when those chances appear, it is up to us not to squander them. Exactly 1 year after that cold afternoon, when Clara almost had to return the birthday cake, she stood in the same spot, the entrance to the capital city's supermarket, but this time carrying a box, full of colorful invitations. The contrast was so striking that she had to pause for a moment to absorb the magnitude of the transformation. "Clara, are you okay?" asked Luke, now 8 years old and noticeably taller, tugging at the hem of her blouse. He wore the same junior captain T-shirt that Victor had given him, but now it was accompanied by an official volunteer badge from the Mark Carson Community Center. "I'm great, little captain. I was just reminiscing." She smiled and handed some invitations to her brother. "Shall we invite people to the center's 1-year anniversary party?" It was Saturday morning, and they had decided to spend a few hours distributing invitations for the celebration that would take place the following week. Rose was at the center organizing the event's logistics, and Victor was in a meeting with potential investors to expand the project to other cities. As they walked through the supermarket, Luke approached customers with the naturalness of a child who had learned that the world could be a welcoming place. "Would you like to come to our party? We're going to have rocket cake," he said to a middle-aged gentleman who smiled and accepted the invitation with tenderness. Clara watched her brother with admiration. It was hard to believe that this confident and outgoing child was the same one who, a year earlier, had cried silently when he thought he wouldn't get his birthday cake. Luke had become the soul of the community center, always eager to help and incredibly affectionate with other children who arrived scared and distrustful. "Clara," a familiar voice called her. It was the cashier who had witnessed the embarrassing situation a year earlier. "How are you? Haven't seen you around here in a while." "I'm well. Thank you for asking." Clara extended an invitation to her. "Actually, we're inviting everyone to a special party. You remember that day?" "Of course I remember. The kind gentleman who paid the difference for the cake." The employee smiled warmly. "That was so lovely. How are things now?" "Very different," Clara replied, feeling a wave of gratitude. "That man completely changed our lives, and now we're trying to do the same for other families." The employee read the invitation with interest. "Mark Carson Community Center. What a beautiful name. I'll try to go. You know, after that day, I always keep an eye out when I see families struggling. Sometimes I can help in small ways." When they left the supermarket, Clara and Luke walked along the same streets they had traversed on foot that cold day. But now they had money for the bus fare. In fact, they had much more than that. They had security, education, future prospects, and most importantly, a mission that gave meaning to their lives. "Clara," Luke said while they waited for the bus, "do you think Grandpa Mark knows about everything that's happening?" The question caught Clara by surprise. Luke rarely spoke about his grandfather, who had passed away when he was only 5 years old. "Why do you ask that?" "Because sometimes when I'm helping at the center, I feel like someone is helping me too, as if there's an invisible force telling me I'm doing the right thing." Luke played with the medal he now also wore around his neck, a replica Victor had specially made for him. "Victor says Grandpa Mark was a hero. I think he'd be proud to see the center named after him." "I'm sure he would," Clara agreed, feeling her eyes well up. It was impressive how Luke, even being so young, had developed a deep understanding of Mark's legacy and the importance of the work they were doing. When they arrived at the community center, they found Rose in what was once the damp basement where they had lived. Now transformed into a cozy children's library, the space buzzed with activity. Rose was sitting on the floor, reading a story about astronauts to a group of small children, her soft voice echoing through the colorful walls. Clara paused at the library entrance, watching her mother. Rose had changed drastically over the year. It wasn't just the physical aspect, although she had gained weight and regained a healthy complexion. It was something deeper. Rose had found her calling, her purpose. Coordinating assistance for other families wasn't just a job for her, it was a personal mission. "And so," Rose was telling the children, "the little astronaut realized that even though he was very far from Earth, he was never truly alone, because he carried in his heart the love of all the people who cared for him." A girl of about 6 raised her hand. "Aunt Rose, does the astronaut come home?" "Always comes home," Rose replied with a smile, "because home isn't a place, it's where the people who love us are." When the story ended and the children dispersed to other activities, Rose approached Clara and Luke. "How was the invitation distribution?" "Very good," Clara replied. "People are excited to see the center. Some even offered to help with the party." "Great. Victor called a little while ago. The meeting with the investors was excellent. They want to finance the project's expansion to at least 3 rural towns in the next 2 years. Rose hugged her children. "Do you realize what this means? We'll be able to help hundreds of other families." Luke jumped excitedly. "Does that mean I'll be able to help build more centers?" "Absolutely, little captain. You and Clara are an essential part of all this." That afternoon, while Rose coordinated preparations for the following week's party, Clara and Luke went up to Victor's office on the top floor of the center. He was on the phone, but waved for them to come in and sit down. "Perfect," Victor was saying. "So we confirm the news report will be on Thursday, and the documentary about innovative social projects will be filmed on Friday. Thank you." When he hung up, Victor turned to them with a tired but satisfied smile. "How was your morning?" "We distributed all the invitations," Clara said, "and Luke gained at least 20 new fans." "It's true," Luke confirmed, laughing. "A lady said I was such a sweet child and gave $10 as a donation to the center." Victor chuckled. "You're becoming our best fundraiser, Luke. Maybe we should put that on your resume." "Victor," Clara said, becoming more serious, "I wanted to talk about something. I've been thinking a lot about the future, about my studies, about the center. I'm listening. I want to pursue a dual degree, administration and social work. I know it will be harder, take more time, but I think I need both qualifications to truly contribute to what we're building here. Victor leaned forward, interested. That's an excellent idea, Clara. And you know you can count on all the necessary support. But may I ask what specifically motivated you? Every family that comes here has a unique story, specific needs. Rose has a natural talent for understanding and welcoming these people, but I also want to have the technical knowledge to develop more effective programs. Clara paused, organizing her thoughts. I want to be able to create solutions that go beyond welfare. I want to help families become independent and prosperous. Like we became, Luke added with precocious wisdom. Exactly like we became, Clara agreed. Victor felt a wave of paternal pride. Clara, when I met you a year ago, I already knew you were special. But watching you grow, seeing how you develop this broad vision and this determination, it's extraordinary. I learned from the best teacher, she replied, smiling. In fact, Victor said, standing up and walking to the window that overlooked the center's courtyard, you taught me a great deal. When I started this institute, I thought I was fulfilling a social mission. But meeting you showed me that sometimes we are the ones who receive the most when we try to help others. Luke ran to the window and joined Victor. Downstairs in the courtyard, dozens of children played while their mothers chatted on benches, some holding babies, others helping with recreational activities. It was a scene of normalcy and peace that contrasted drastically with the despair many of those families had faced before arriving at the center. Victor, Luke said, do you think Grandpa Mark imagined that medal would lead us to you? The question, asked with the profound simplicity of a child, touched Victor deeply. He thought about the last conversation he had had with Mark, weeks before his friend passed away. Mark had mentioned concerns about his family's future, had spoken about signs and destiny, about how sometimes the universe conspired to place the right people in each other's paths. You know, Luke, I think your grandfather did know. He was always very wise about these things. Victor placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. But regardless, what matters is what we do with the opportunities we receive. And are we doing the right thing? You are doing much more than the right thing. You are honoring the memory of an extraordinary man and creating a legacy that will last for generations. That night, the family dined together in the community kitchen, as they did every evening. It was a ritual Rose had established. No matter how busy they were, they always gathered for a family meal. Often other families from the center joined them, creating an atmosphere of extended community that resembled the times when large families gathered around a table. Rose, said Abigail, one of the mothers who had arrived at the center 3 months earlier with 2 young children, I wanted to thank you again for everything. I got the job at the garment manufacturing company, and next week we'll be able to move out of the accommodation into our own apartment. That's wonderful, Abigail. You worked very hard to get here. Rose smiled with genuine joy. But remember, even after you leave here, you'll always have family here. It's important to maintain those ties. Of course, in fact, I want to volunteer on weekends, help with meals. It's the way I've found to give back. These were the conversations that moved Victor the most. Seeing families who had arrived in despair leaving strengthened and still wanting to contribute to help others was living proof that the model they had created worked. After dinner, as they helped clean the kitchen, Clara approached Victor with a thoughtful expression. Do you know what I was thinking about today? What? That first day, when you paid the difference for the cake, I was so focused on the shame of not having enough money that I almost didn't notice the kindness of the gesture. Clara paused, stacking the clean dishes. Now I understand that it wasn't just a random act of generosity. It was the universe putting the right pieces in the right places. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest gestures, Victor agreed. And sometimes, added Rose, who had approached and overheard the conversation, the right people appear exactly when we need them most, even if we don't realize it at the time. Luke, who was organizing the chairs, stopped and looked at the 3 adults who had become his family. Do you know what I think? What do you think, little captain? I think Grandpa Mark sent Victor to take care of us, but he also sent us to take care of Victor, because before he met us, he was alone too. Luke's insight left everyone silent for a moment. It was true. Victor had spent years focused on work, dedicating himself entirely to the Institute, but without a family of his own to give personal meaning to his mission. Finding Rose, Clara, and Luke had filled a void he didn't even know existed. "You're right, Luke," Victor admitted, his voice choked. "You saved me as much as I saved you." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Victor went up to the community center's terrace. It was a space they had created for moments of reflection and contemplation, some simple benches, potted plants, and a panoramic view of the illuminated city. He sat on his favorite bench, from where he could see the lights flickering in the windows of distant apartments, each representing a family, a story, dreams, and challenges. He took out of his pocket the letter Mark had written to him, already memorized, but which he still liked to reread in moments of reflection. "My friend Victor," he murmured the familiar words. "If you are reading this, it means our mission here has come to an end." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the plants around him, and Victor smiled. Sometimes he felt Mark's presence so vividly that it seemed he could see him there, silently approving everything they had built. "Thank you, Mark," he whispered into the night, "for teaching me that a soldier never abandons his comrade, for leaving me a family to love, for showing me that life is worth living, when we live it for something greater than ourselves." A week later, the Mark Carson Community Center was decorated with colorful balloons and celebratory banners for its one-year anniversary party. Hundreds of people gathered in the courtyard, families who had been helped by the center, volunteers, donors, local authorities, and community members who had become supporters of the project. Rose, wearing a blue dress that Clara had specially chosen for the occasion, ascended the small improvised stage to deliver the main speech. Her hands trembled slightly. She was still not entirely comfortable speaking in public. But her voice came out firm and clear. "A year ago," she began, "I was just a desperate mother trying to keep my family together. I worked double shifts, saved every penny, and even then, it often wasn't enough." She paused, looking at Clara and Luke in the front row. "My children grew up too fast, taking on responsibilities they shouldn't have, and I felt like I was failing them every day." A murmur of understanding rippled through the audience. Many people there knew exactly that feeling. "Today," Rose continued, "I am no longer just a mother struggling to survive. I'm a mother who found a way to transform our pain into purpose, our experience into wisdom, to help other families." Her voice grew stronger. "This center is not just a place where we offer help. It is a place where we recognize that all of us have something to offer. All of us have value. All of us deserve dignity and hope." The applause was warm and prolonged. Victor, watching from the side of the stage, felt his chest swell with pride. Seeing Rose speak with such confidence and passion was one of the greatest rewards of this entire journey. "I want to thank," Rose said when the applause ceased, "the person who made all of this possible. Dr. Victor Alliance not only saved us, he taught us that saving each other is what gives meaning to life." When Victor ascended the stage, emotion almost overwhelmed him. Looking at the sea of faces in front of him, people who had found hope, families who had rebuilt their lives, children who now had future prospects, he knew that Mark would be proud. "Mark Carson taught me that a soldier never abandons his comrade," Victor said, his voice reverberating through the courtyard. "Today, all of you are living proof that when we don't abandon each other, miracles happen. When we extend a hand to those in need, we don't just change that person's life. We transform our own lives too." He pointed to a special table in the corner of the courtyard, where a collection of photos from the past 12 months was displayed. Families arriving at the center in despair and leaving strengthened, children growing up in a safe environment, mothers finding employment and independence, fathers regaining their dignity. Each photo tells a story of transformation. Each face represents a second chance. Each smile is proof that it's worth believing in human kindness. Victor paused, searching for Rose, Clara, and Luke in the crowd. "And it all started with $5.50 that were missing to buy a birthday cake." The audience laughed, many wiping away tears. It was the perfect synthesis of how small moments can transform into monumental changes. When the speeches ended, and the party came alive with music and abundant food. Clara found Victor sitting in a corner, watching Luke play with other children. "Tired?" she asked, sitting next to him. "No, just fulfilled." Victor smiled. "You know, there are moments in life when we are absolutely sure that we are exactly where we should be, doing exactly what we should be doing." "I know what you mean." Clara watched her mother animatedly chatting with a group of volunteers, radiating a happiness that had been unthinkable a year before. "Sometimes I wonder what our lives would be like if you hadn't appeared that day." "I didn't just appear," Victor corrected gently. "I was guided, by forces I can't fully explain, but in which I fully believe." Luke ran up to them, face sweaty and smile radiant. "Victor, Clara, come see. Some children are drawing rockets from the library and they want you to see." As they followed Luke to the children's activity table, Victor felt a deep peace settle over him. There was living proof that Mark's legacy continued to grow, through the children who played happily, the families who found security, the community that had formed around simple but powerful values: dignity, solidarity, and hope. As the party began to wind down and the last families were leaving, Victor walked through the center one last time before heading home. He passed by the children's library, where some books were still scattered on the small tables. He went up to the community kitchen, where volunteers were finishing cleaning. He went down to the courtyard, where some chairs were still disorganized from the party. In each space he saw echoes of the lives that had been transformed there. Not just the families receiving help, but also the volunteers who found purpose, the donors who discovered the joy of contributing, the employees who saw meaning in the work they did. When he finally locked the main door of the center and walked down the street towards his apartment, Victor brought his hand to his chest, where Mark's medal rested beneath his shirt. It was no longer a weight of unresolved guilt, but a luminous reminder that some friendships transcend time and physical existence itself. "Mission accomplished, my brother," he murmured to the stars beginning to appear in the night sky. "And the mission continues." End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Victor, Rose, Clara, and Luke has touched your hearts as much as it touched ours. This narrative reminds us that sometimes the angels we seek are closer than we imagine, and that small acts of kindness can transform entire lives. To continue this emotional journey with us, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about solidarity, hope, and second chances. You can find it by clicking the link next to this message. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Every day, we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity of life and the miracles of everyday existence. Your comments are very important to us. Tell us which part of the story moved you the most and share your own experiences of kindness and generosity. Don't miss our upcoming content, as we have many more touching stories prepared for you. Until the next encounter, and remember, no one fights alone.